everyone. I'm Carlota Pico from the Content Mix, and I'm excited to be here today with Amanda Holmes, who is EMEA and APAC Marketing Director at Kodak Alaris and has over 20 years of experience in marketing and communications. Welcome, Amanda, and thank you so much for joining us today on the Content Mix.
Thank you for having me. Very excited to share some of my stories.
We are too. I can't wait to dive further into your experience. But to get this interview started off, I'd like to learn a little bit about what you're doing today and how you got to where you are.
So Amanda Holmes, you said sort of 20 years, it makes me feel, whoa, very old, but it is, it's 20 years plus, but it seems like just yesterday that I was sitting in Edinburgh working for an advertising agency, and then I got married. Maybe that was good, maybe that was bad, and then moved down south to England and started really in my tech career. So I started off life in advertising and agencies, but then moved to client side, always thinking, I'll move back to agency. There's no way I want to stay corporate. I never really did move back to agency. I did dip a little bit and consulted for a few years. But primarily my experience has been B2B, technology, IT companies. My marketing schooling was at Intel for 8 years, did a lot of, as you can imagine, a big company, did a lot of different varied jobs. And I really say that was my university experience. That's where I learned all the different techniques and skill sets around marketing and predominantly around stakeholder management. How do you work with your different stakeholders? So moved from Intel to Polycom, and that's where I gained my management experience, and nearly there from then on in, I sort of, have been managing people, trying to work our sort of go-to-market strategies, again, primarily working globally with our state, US headquarters. So that's what I'm mainly familiar with, getting our sort of strategy and direction from headquarters and then taking that and trying to craft that into something that makes sense and relevant for us in EMEA. Mm-hmm. Then I did take just 3 years out, or where I thought I quite like to just sort of see what it's like to be on my own. So I did consult for a few years, but then felt I was probably more suited, let's be honest, to the corporate world, because I've been in it for so long. So to find myself back in the corporate world and find myself now managing a team of sort of 12 people at Kodak Alaris, exciting company. We have a heritage, Eastman Kodak from the old days, but then we formed our own holding company. We're privately held. And I'm part of the Alaris division, where we're focused in on information capture, looking at, how you're ingesting your data, and whether that's from paper, whether that's from a JPEG or whatever that is, digitally format, and then how does that then look and work into your workflow processes. So we come from a heritage of a very big company, Eastman Kodak, but we are privately held. So we're now like a startup, and that's really quite exciting we've got more agility. And I've got a team that we're really here to understand the strategy that's coming from worldwide, but then really what is our go-to-market strategy? And the refreshing thing with my role is that I work hand in hand with sales, and we create the strategy together. Really refreshing, coming from quite big corporate blue chip companies, there was a tendency for sales and marketing to be a bit like that, but we're here because we're a smaller company, we're more agile, we work together to figure out how the hell do we go to market, how do we take the direction that global has given us and translate that into a go-to-market strategy. So it's my role to really understand, translate that into something that we can execute. And then in January, just before COVID hit, I got got a sort of an exciting opportunity to take on the Asia Pac market, and that's completely new to me. So it's a new culture, a new way of working. So it's really exciting now to be understanding, what their requirements are, and how I can, take my learnings from EMEA and see other things that we can learn together. So that's really where we are today.
Well, congratulations on your new role in the APAC region. And also because of your vast experience, I am going to focus on two main topics, which will be channel marketing and go-to-market strategies. So
Yep.
moving into channel marketing, what are the first steps towards developing a channel marketing strategy? Let's bring it down to the basics.
Yeah. And for me, it's always understanding those goals and objectives. And I think, as you want to create an activity or, anything, it's always understanding why. And it always sort of amuses me, I might get questions, obviously not from my team today, because they're purely subject matter experts, but, maybe that you get a question or, I want to do a trade show, or I want to do this event. And I always say, well, why? What are we trying to achieve? And it's like, well, and sometimes you might get a response of, oh, because that's what we've always done. And it's like, okay, but what are we trying to achieve? And I think that's, as you're trying to build a strategy, and certainly as we, build it with the channel, because we are, more or less 100% indirect, we are relying on their understanding and their sort of feet on the street on how we can get out to the market, because we don't have a huge sales base, and we don't have that touch primarily to the end customer. So it's important for us to really build, that strategy with our channel, with the right channel. But yeah, you've got to start with what are our goals and objectives? What are our routes to market? And we're sort of typically a classic tier 2 model where we go, through distribution. They're the sort of whole, the warehouse of our products. So we don't stock the products, they will stock the products, and then that will then go out to our resellers who then have the touch to the end customer. So that's typically, we do have different, because there are different products and solutions that we offer, but typically it's a tier 2 model. So it's important to understand what your go-to-market is and then build your goals and objectives around that.
Okay, excellent. What about like challenges and advantages of channel marketing? Because it does seem kind of complicated, especially in terms of maintaining the same voice for the same brand across all your different channels.
Yeah. I think, the advantages are obviously, as I said, because we, don't have a vast sales team, so it increases your feet on the street.
Okay.
So those are and that's one of the main advantages of really making sure you've got the right channel so they can be touching the end customer. I suppose one of the challenges is that you have more feet on the street, so you have more complexity. There are different channels that you're working with. It's not just one channel. It's not just say, the web shops or system integrators. There's a multiple different of channels. Yes, then you've got the language requirements, etc. Certainly with EMEA and APAC. But I think the key advantages is you're increasing your reach out into the market, and then the challenges is making sure that we can get a consistent message of our brand and not being diluted too much. And I suppose that's one of the major challenges that we face.
Yeah, I know. I definitely want to zoom into that further because essentially each channel offers a different audience, different reach, and potential obstacles as well. So, how do you keep your brand consistent no matter which partner is promoting your services?
It's trying to, first and foremost, I think it's having a very solid strategy, but it's having a robust partner program, and really making sure that we have clear benefits of why a partner would want to engage with us. And really, what do partners, what do sales care about? They care about their share of wallet. So I think it's demonstrating that we have that value, and we create those benefits. And then, the other way is making sure that we have strong account management. And working, very closely. We can't do it across all the channels. We have hundreds of channels within our partner program, sort of partners within our partner program. But then that's where you have to tier them and make sure that, so for your long tail, that you have a very solid distribution strategy. And we're working the distributors, obviously paying to play in their programs, but working them to help the long tail of the channel. And then as you go up the tierings, that we have, dedicated account managers, dedicated marketing managers associated with those partners to build out those joint business plans and joint marketing plans. So it's just getting those tierings correct, but also offering the right benefits to the right sort of partner, which can become become quite a challenge to try and please everybody.
Yeah, no, it must also be really difficult to measure the impact that your brand is having across all of your channels without access to the analytics side of those channels as well. So could you talk to me more about that? Like, how do you measure how well you're performing across your channels, and how do you work with your partners to optimize your campaigns?
So, I mean, we in Kodak Alaris, we actually have a PRM system, so a partner relationship management system, which helps and it feeds into our CRM, and it's something we launched last year. So that helps us measure, certainly the number of partners, the utilization, how many deal registrations. So we certainly measure the effectiveness of the deals through deal reg. We have MDF, utilization, and we can track, how much of the MDF they're using and the ROI of that MDF. Also, we can track if we pass a lead to a partner, then it closes the loop through our CRM. So I think it's trying to, and not every company will have that capability of having such a sophisticated, PRM. Obviously, that's sort of the best practice, but it is trying to then, if you don't have that ability or capability, then it's making sure you are measuring, I think, the key points. So if you are, handing off leads to a partner, make sure you have got a closed loop process. If you are passing a deal to a partner, what is your sort of closed loop process? So I think that we're lucky enough to have that sort of metrics in place, and also it's as I said, it's about having that joint business plan. I think that's absolutely critical, that you understand what your joint goals and objectives are for going to business, and then monitoring that, having obviously your annual review meeting where you set your plan, and then doing your quarterly reviews and checking and balancing that actually you are, on track. And it's also important that marketing are involved in those discussions. What I always say to sales is that I don't have a bunch of marketeers that are there taking orders. Those days are gone. I need my marketeers to be strategic, and to understand why we want to do things, and really to help build what that strategy is. So I think, it stems from having a solid joint plan that you can measure, and you agree together what those measurement points. Obviously, that's your top tiers, and then as I said, then you've got the distribution sort of arm that will help you, manage and hopefully make the smaller resellers, more self-sufficient.
Amanda, what you're saying is actually music to my ears. I've always been in business development, so for me, tying marketing to sales is just part of who I am. I mean, it's part of my DNA as a marketing professional. I wouldn't be able to know what I'm supposed to do in marketing if I weren't in so much contact with sales as well, or in my previous roles and talking to sales constantly. I do want to move into go-to-market strategy. So let's start off again with the basics. So what is a GDM strategy? And obviously by GDM, I mean a go-to-market strategy for our audience who's listening in.
And I think it's about, so go to market, it's about understanding what your value proposition is, and then how do you take that to market with the resources that you have available. And it might identify that you have resource gaps as well. But it is really taking your value proposition, and then, how do we now take this to market to become profitable? That to me is sort of the basic. Wikipedia may say something else slightly different, but it is taking, the simplistic view of, here's my value prop. This is how, now I need to determine how I get it out to market to make money.
Okay. That's a pretty easy way of understanding go-to-market strategies for our audience. So then my next question would be, well, what does every go-to-market model need to address in terms of a few key questions that marketers should be asking themselves when looking to enter a new market?
I suppose it's understanding what our USP is, what value are we bringing to the customers, but it's also, it's obviously spinning it to the customer, and do we know what their challenge points are? What are we trying to solve? And maybe this is a bit one-on-one marketing, but it is, I think certainly in, as we looked in today's times with COVID, etc., we absolutely need to focus in on those customer challenges and make sure that we're relevant to them, not that they're relevant to us. And I think, that it's very simple in my eyes. We've got to understand our customer. We've got to understand what we're trying, how we can solve their pain points.
Mm-hmm. It sounds a lot like starting a startup as well, right? Like identifying the pain points and then providing solutions, and then obviously knowing your value and what value you're able to provide to the customer. So it's a little bit like down, bringing it to a very basic level. It's basic, a very complex level, depending on how you're looking at it. But it's like building a startup from scratch. So you're understanding your audience, you're understanding their pain points, you're providing them with solutions, and then you're creating your value proposition.
Essentially. Okay. That's what we need to do. Keep it simple. But the challenge, it's a noisy market. I think, in any sort of B2B space or, B2C, etc., it's noisy. There are a lot of competitors. Certainly, nowadays, everybody's on LinkedIn, everybody's on email, everyone's doing virtual events. So you've got to try to stand out and be persistent, but not obviously annoyingly persistent, but don't give up. I think if you feel you have a good idea, you've got to try things and try different things and be prepared to fail quick and move on. But don't be scared to try things just because we've never done them before. It was scary times, back in sort of February, March, when, all events were being cancelled. We're all having, I've been talking about we need a balance of virtual versus physical for years. And in some of my previous jobs, I've been able to do that. In Kodak Alaris, we're a little bit, still very physically focused, if you like. But it's enabled us now to look at that balance and understand that actually we can't do everything face to face anyway, because we can't scale our message. So it's helped us understand that actually we do need to revise our strategy a bit and have that balance. Hopefully we can get back to face-to-face events, in the next few weeks, months would be lovely. But we need to have that balance of virtual and digital activity as well. We can't just go back to having all physical face-to-face events. We have to have that balance because we've got to get our reach out into the marketplace. And that's really important, that we're visible at the right times. That's the magic sauce within marketing. How do we get to the right people? Where do we know that they're looking? We've got to, that's our role. We've got to try and work that one out. And it's not clear cut. We're going to make mistakes. But yeah, I always say, fail quick, move on.
It reminds me a lot of my days as an entrepreneur, where I was just constantly A/B testing, figuring out my different personas, pitching different solutions to those personas as well, or communicating with them in a different way so that my message was received in a better way as well. Okay, broadly speaking, what regional nuances, challenges, or opportunities should marketers keep in mind when addressing the EMEA region, versus the APAC region? So there's a lot of differences. I mean, we're talking about Asia, Europe, Middle East. Talking broadly speaking, so much information to just process.
And so I was like, so I can take on Asia Pac. Well, I know Australia, and that's sort of about it. And okay, they've got a slightly funnier accent than we have. But I mean, I think what I've sort of noticed is it can be the maturity in terms of where we are in the market. Certainly, I think in most places in EMEA, or certainly in our market, we're probably more mature in our digital transformation journey. Obviously, there are differences there, but I'm just sort of saying generally. And then if I look at Asia Pac, they have more sort of their journey is beginning, but they're much sort of at the earlier stages. So that makes it really exciting. So we can take some of the learnings and see some of the things that are happening within certainly Western Europe, and then take that and help mould the strategy for Asia Pac. So I think it is definitely, I mean, obviously culture as well, is very different in all of the different countries. And I think that's what makes, working in EMEA and certainly Asia Pac now interesting and exciting, because we're all so different. It would be boring if we were all the same. But there are similarities, and there are, we have sort of, as consumers ourselves, we know we're more tend to going online and looking at things, on the big bad cloud. So there are similarities that we can see. Again, they're in different levels of maturity across all the different countries, but we're all sort of trending towards sort of that sort of more digital feel and looking at things on the internet, etc. So we can take those learnings and build that. So that, I think that's what I love when I have my staff meetings. I'm spanning, from London to Dubai to Germany to India to Beijing, and it's just great to get the sort of different, trying to do the different time zones is interesting, but it's you get the different sort of opinions, and sharing those learnings, sharing the best practices is just so valuable. And just getting those different opinions and going, I didn't realise that happened in Dubai, or that's what the Germans did. It's just then understanding why these things are happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I worked across the GCC region as well as different Asian countries, and now I'm working in Europe. And one of my biggest learning experiences comes from the UX side of communication. So whereas Asia websites tend to be cluttered by European standards, that's the way that Asians like to consume their content and browse their different websites. Whereas in Europe, the simpler, the better. That's basically the messaging. When it comes to messaging, especially, one really has to keep in mind the UX of the website or the UX of the app or whatever their product is. Okay, so to wrap this section up, Amanda, what major challenges did you face during your expansion phase, and how did you resolve those problems? And of course, feel free to just zoom into maybe one or two challenges.
I mean, it's, and certainly, if you're meaning sort of the expansion phase in terms of what moving from a role from EMEA to Asia Pac, or I wasn't quite sure the context of that, but I think it's always just trying to get because you're now have a number of new stakeholders that you have to engage with, and as I said sort of before, right back in my background, for me at Intel, it was all about understanding who your stakeholders are and really engaging with them and getting them aligned and bought in. So that's so I've got that skill set, but it's also a challenge when you're building those new relationships, because I've had good relationships then say with the EMEA stakeholders, and now I have to build a whole new level of relationships and networking in Asia Pac. And they don't know me. I'm someone sitting in London, and I don't know Asia Pac. I put my hands up. I've never worked in that market before, and obviously I'm not going to be able to come over and see you for several months. And it's always nice to sort of see people face to face to start with, to build that relationship. So we're having to do things virtually, and we're having to I'm trying to understand their culture, their challenges, their pain points. So I think that it's just it's a way of working, but certainly that's the challenge that I'm now grasping and embracing, to really understand how that culture works and how I can support them and prove that I can add value. That's the.
I think it's really important how you zoomed into the relationships that you're creating across the APAC region as well, because throughout the podcast, I'm normally focused on the end user, on the end client, but we don't often look into the relationships that need to be built in order to launch new products across different regions, relationships with distributors, suppliers, providers, etc. And that's going to be part of your success story as well, the strength of those relationships that you're building. And that requires knowing or understanding their culture as well, because whereas in Europe, we might be very straightforward, especially in Western Europe, we might be very straightforward with each other and communicate on a in Spanish, we would say de tú a tú, which means you to you. So there aren't very many, or in French, de toi à toi, there aren't very many obstacles when it comes to communication because we're very straightforward, we're very direct, we're very honest. My experience working with Asian countries is that oftentimes communication isn't as fluent, and people may not be as direct in their messages, and therefore relationships sometimes can be kind of left in the air where you don't really know how to interpret the message because they're trying to say something without actually saying it. And that can be an obstacle, of course, and it requires just knowing the culture and just figuring out how to work around that. Okay. Moving into our last set of questions, Amanda, this will be a rapid fire set of questions, which is basically your recommendation to our audience. You provided great tips and insights already, so I cannot wait to hear about your I can't wait to hear about your source of inspiration, Amanda. So who do you admire? An influencer, a professional role model?
And I was thinking about this, and it's actually I have a number of different people, and actually I have sort of old, managers that certainly have inspired me, and some of them have been good, some of them have been bad, but even the bad ones have helped to inspire me, to move me forward. But I think at the moment, actually, my inspiration, and maybe this is a bit boring, but I'm a great believer of looking and trying to understand the best information. So I'm a LinkedIn sort of fan. I try and understand, certainly in our virtual world today, I'm in sort of social media, and I try and approach and work in different sort of network groups. So I'm in a sort of a B2B marketing group at the moment. The Content Mix is a new group, which is great. So, and also there's another, I think it's called, what's it called? There's a Hot Topics private group where bringing sort of B2B marketing leaders, across Europe together. And I find those are my most sort of valuable sources, because it puts you understand that you're not alone in some of your challenges and pain points, and you have sort of like-minded people, and it just gives you that confidence that actually, be confident in yourself. And normally if you think something in your gut, then go with that, because it's generally right. So I think I'm at the moment, I'm certainly getting inspiration from meeting all these different people within these sort of networking groups. I try and do them sort of once a month. You can't do them all the time, but being associated with some of these sort of networking and relationship groups just helps to, certainly from a career perspective, and from our understanding not just my industry but marketing overall, helps sort of validate, and then makes my brain trigger, go, oh, they've mentioned TikTok, should I go now and adventure TikTok as something, as an avenue for us moving forward? So there's tips and tricks that I get from that. So maybe a bit boring, but that's certainly where I get my inspiration from today.
Yeah, TikTok is a whole different conversation. I could go on hours about TikTok and how entertaining it is, but that I don't necessarily know how to implement it when it comes to B2B social media strategy.
I haven't quite worked that one out yet. I don't think our audience are quite there yet, but I'm a bit of a stalker on TikTok, and certainly my children are all over it. So.
Well, it's definitely fun. Okay. What about a group, a book, or a publication that you'd like to recommend?
Yeah, so actually there was a book. I mean, the groups sort of certainly, I would say, try and get yourselves associated with sort of an association, like, B2B, depending where you are in the world. But, in the UK, we have B2B marketing, there's Hot Topics, obviously there's Content Mix, there's other groups out there. Try and get yourselves associated where you can network with peers, and have those like-minded conversations. From a book perspective, actually, and again, this may be a bit boring, but in my last company, we redesigned our cultural beliefs, and we sort of built in sort of methodologies it was actually from sort of this book, but all around accountability. And it's actually one of the books that I read sheet to sheet, because most of them you just sort of go, yeah, whatever. But it was all around accountability, and really, it does, really help you fix your mindset that you are accountable for what you're in charge of, and stop sort of, pointing the finger and, oh yeah, but I couldn't get to it because, or, trying to hide behind email. And, we try to get rid of, we certainly, I think in a lot of companies you have sort of this blame culture, and it's trying to get rid of that and taking that accountability for yourself, and building that culture. So certainly that was a book that I really recommend, but also one that I'm about to read, which we spoke about at the beginning, but it's Schmarketing, but it's all about that alignment with sales and marketing and how we should now have this blended approach. And is it sales, is it marketing, or actually is it schmarketing? And should we be, combining? I've seen, some organisations where they combine the roles together, and they don't have the separate, sales and marketing. So I think that's an interesting sort of methodology, philosophy moving forward.
Definitely. Amanda, would you mind reading the title and the author for our audience, those people that aren't watching us on our YouTube channel or listening to us?
So it's Fix It, Getting Accountability Right, and it's by Roger Connors and Tom Smith. And it's all around they were the best sellers of the Oz principle. It's very much a corporate sort of business to business book for sure, but I think it helps set what your how to work your cultural beliefs within your company, and as I said, hold that accountability to yourself. If we're all holding that, then we should have a healthier culture.
Definitely. Okay, today's last question will be your favorite app at the moment and why. And it might be TikTok, hey? I mean, TikTok is
I was going to say TikTok. That's purely because I stalk TikTok. But then another, maybe boring, but it's got to be Amazon at the moment, because what would I do without Amazon? I mean, and actually my Sainsbury's. So in the UK, we have our UK supermarket. So Sainsbury's, because I've got to do my click and collect. So that's probably my most used app.
COVID times, right? COVID times call for COVID measures and COVID apps. So yeah, definitely. I'm all about Amazon lately as well. Okay, Amanda, those were great insights. Thank you so much for joining us on the Content Mix. It was awesome to meet you and really great to learn about your experience.
No, thank you very much for having me.
The pleasure has been ours. And to everyone listening in today, thank you so much for joining us on the Content Mix. For more perspectives on the content marketing industry in Europe, check out the Content Mix. We'll be releasing interviews just like this one every week, so keep on tuning in. Thanks again. Have a fabulous day and see you next time. Bye.
Cheers.